Okay, so get this right. Learning a new language, it like actually rewires your brain.
Yeah, it's pretty
Isn't
good.
that wild? Like
Yeah,
literally changes the physical structure.
it does. It does.
Crazy. So, we're diving deep today into how this all works, specifically with English.
Right?
We've got some really fascinating excerpts from a blog post by the British School of Barcelona
Okay.
and an article called Your Brain and Learning English Unlocking Cognitive Potential. Those are our sources for today.
Sounds good.
So, are you ready to explore how learning English impacts our brains?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
What benefits we get, and maybe some tips and tricks to make the process a little smoother?
Yeah, I think a lot of people struggle with that. So,
Yeah.
all right.
All right, let's get into it. So, when I first heard that learning a language actually changes your brain, I was like, okay, but like how?
Right. Yeah.
What's actually happening in there?
Well, that's what I find so fascinating is that there are specific areas of our brains that like light up when we're learning a new language.
So it's not just like a general thinking harder kind of thing.
Right.
There are actual specialized parts of the brain involved.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, the Your Brain and Learning English article mentions Broca's area. Have you heard of that one?
I think so. That sounds familiar.
It's all about speech production.
Okay.
And Wernicke's area, which handles comprehension.
Got it.
So they're like the brain's communication centers, you know.
Ah.
They're firing off all these signals as we're forming sentences and understanding what other people are saying to us.
Okay, so that's like the actual mechanics of how we speak and understand.
Yeah.
But where do all those like new words and grammar rules go?
Right. Well, that's where the hippocampus comes in.
Okay, I've heard of the hippocampus.
It's not just a simple storage unit, though. It's a little more
Yeah.
complex than that.
I figured.
Think of it as a master weaver, you know, like connecting those new words and rules to our experiences and our emotions. Imagine like you're learning the word apple while actually biting into a crisp, juicy apple.
Yeah.
That sensory experience, you know,
Yeah.
it helps the hippocampus create a richer, more memorable connection.
Right.
Makes it easier to recall the word later.
So it's not just about rote memorization.
No.
It's about like making those words come alive in our brains.
Yeah.
I like that.
Connecting them with real experiences.
Yeah, yeah. But what about like the sounds of English? All those tricky pronunciations and accents and stuff.
Yeah, the sounds are a big part of it.
Where does that all get processed?
Well, that's where the auditory cortex jumps into action,
Okay.
helping us decipher all those sounds and rhythms of English.
Makes sense.
It's like tuning your ear to a whole new musical instrument.
I can imagine it takes some serious brain power to coordinate all of that.
Yeah, it really does.
It reminds me of, like, one of my biggest struggles with English, personally, is the grammar rules.
Oh, yeah.
I swear they were invented just to confuse me.
They can be really tricky.
I know, even for native speakers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, even for us.
I mean, is there any logic to it?
Well, the beauty of it is that your brain, even though it's confusing, your brain is constantly adapting,
Okay.
building new pathways as you grapple with those irregular verbs and inconsistent spellings and all that.
Right.
It's kind of like navigating a complex maze, you know?
Yeah.
But the more you practice, the easier it gets. Your brain becomes more efficient at navigating that maze.
That is reassuring.
Yeah.
But honestly, like, sometimes the sheer size of the English vocabulary feels overwhelming.
Right.
It's like trying to memorize the names of everyone in a massive city.
That's a good analogy.
How do you even begin to tackle that?
It's true. That vast vocabulary can feel really daunting.
Yeah.
But here's the amazing part. Studies show that learning new words, actually changes the density of gray matter in your brain,
What?
like building mental muscle.
Hold on. So learning new words is actually making my brain physically different.
It is, yeah. Your brain is actually changing.
That's incredible. It's like a brain upgrade.
It is.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked about some of the changes that are happening in the brain, but let's talk about the benefits, like the overall benefits of learning English.
Okay, yeah.
Both sources we're looking at today, they talk about some pretty impressive cognitive advantages.
Yeah.
What
Wow.
stands out to you?
Well, one that stands out is the impact on memory.
Okay.
Learning a new language, especially later in life, it challenges your brain in a way that strengthens those memory networks.
I have noticed that since I started like learning English more seriously, I'm better at remembering things in general, not just English words.
Right.
Is that connected?
It very well could be. The mental gymnastics involved in switching between languages and grappling with new grammar rules and all that, it seems to have a ripple effect, enhancing your overall cognitive function. It's like cross-training for your brain.
So it really is like a gym membership for the brain.
Exactly.
I'm already feeling smarter just thinking about it. But what other cognitive perks are there? The British School of Barcelona blog, they mentioned something about aging.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one.
What was that?
This is where it gets really fascinating. Research suggests that learning a new language, especially later in life, can delay the onset of age-related cognitive decline.
Seriously?
Yeah.
So learning English could actually help me stay sharp as I age.
It's not a magic bullet, of course,
Right.
but it's like building cognitive reserve,
Okay.
giving your brain a buffer against those age-related changes.
Wow, that seems almost too good to be true. What's the science behind that? Like, how does that actually work?
Well, think of it this way. Learning a new language is like a workout for your brain, all right?
Okay.
You're challenging it to create new neural connections and pathways.
Right.
This constant stimulation helps to build that cognitive reserve, which acts as a protective factor against age-related decline.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's like keeping your brain fit and active so it stays strong as you get older.
I'm sold. But, learning English isn't always easy. The pasted text article lists some pretty intimidating challenges specific to English. Like, where do we even begin to tackle those?
Well, I think it's helpful to understand why those challenges exist in the first place.
Okay.
Take English pronunciation, for example.
Okay.
All those silent letters and inconsistent spellings.
Ugh, don't get me started.
I know, right?
It's a nightmare.
It's a product of the language's long and complex history,
Okay.
borrowing bits and pieces from various languages over centuries.
Ah, so it's like a Frankenstein's monster of a language.
It is. It's like a linguistic melting pot, which makes it really tricky to master.
So it's not that I'm bad at pronunciation, it's that English is just a little chaotic
Exactly.
that makes me feel slightly better.
And the good news is that your brain is remarkably adaptable.
Okay.
With consistent practice and exposure, you'll start to recognize those patterns and make sense of the seeming chaos.
I'm trying.
I know you are.
That brings me to another challenge. English idioms.
Ah, yes, idioms.
Sometimes I feel like I'm learning a secret code.
I know, right? They're very particular.
Like, what on earth does it mean to kick the bucket?
Right. They can be so strange if you're not familiar with them.
Where do these even come from?
Well, idioms are definitely a quirk of English that can trip up learners.
Yeah.
They're like little cultural puzzles that reflect the history and the humor of language.
Interesting.
But the key is to approach them with curiosity rather than frustration.
Okay.
Think of them as a way to deepen your understanding of English culture and its unique way of expressing ideas.
So it's about embracing the weirdness and having fun with it, right?
Exactly.
I can try to do that.
And remember, even native English speakers sometimes struggle with idioms.
Really?
Oh yeah, they're constantly evolving, so it's a lifelong learning process for everyone.
Okay, that makes me feel less alone in my idiom confusion.
Good, good.
But let's talk about strategies for a minute. The pasted text article mentions some neuroscience-based approaches to learning English.
Right.
What are some of the highlights? Like, what should we be focusing on?
Well, one that I find particularly fascinating is active listening.
Okay.
It's about going beyond passively hearing English and actively engaging with the sounds, rhythms, and nuances of the language.
So it's not just about listening. It's about, like, really tuning in and trying to decipher the code,
Right.
like a linguistic detective.
Exactly. And the more you actively listen, the better your brain gets at processing those subtle distinctions in pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm.
So it's a skill you can develop.
Yeah, absolutely.
What other, like, brain-boosting strategies stand out to you?
Well, spaced repetition is a technique that leverages the way our brains naturally forget information over time.
Okay.
By reviewing material at increasing intervals, you're essentially tricking your brain into retaining it for the long haul.
So it's like you learn something, then you wait a bit, then you review it, then you wait a longer bit.
Exactly, yeah.
And that helps solidify it in your memory.
It does, it does.
I've definitely seen those spaced repetition apps, but I never really understood the science behind them.
Yeah.
That's actually pretty clever. Any other tips that tap into, like, brain power?
One that's often overlooked is the power of sleep.
Sleep. What does sleep have to do with language learning?
A lot, actually. During sleep, our brains consolidate memories and make connections between new information and existing knowledge.
Oh, wow.
So if you're serious about learning English, prioritize those 7-8 hours of quality sleep every night.
You know what they say? Sleep on it. I'm definitely guilty of not getting enough sleep.
I think a lot of us are.
but I'm starting to see how crucial it is, not just for learning English, but for everything.
Absolutely.
Okay, so sleep is important. Got it. Anything else?
And don't underestimate the power of physical exercise.
Wait, so going for a run can actually help me learn English?
It can. It may seem unrelated, but exercise increases blood flow to the brain, which enhances cognitive function, including learning and memory.
That's a win-win.
Exactly. Imagine listening to an English podcast while going for a walk or hitting the gym.
Okay, yeah.
You're not only getting your heart rate up, but you're also priming your brain to absorb those new words and grammar rules more effectively.
Mind blown. It's like hacking your brain for optimal language learning.
Precisely.
I like it.
And it highlights how interconnected our physical and mental well-being are.
That's a really good point. All right, so we've got active listening, we've got spaced repetition, we've got sleep, we've got exercise.
Yeah.
What else?
Now, one strategy that can be particularly helpful,
Yeah.
but also challenging, is immersion.
Immersion, yeah.
Surrounding yourself with the language as much as possible.
That sounds great in theory, but it can be tough to achieve if you don't live in an English-speaking country.
You're absolutely right. But remember, technology has made immersion more accessible than ever before.
True.
You can find online courses, language exchange apps, virtual tutors. The possibilities are endless.
Good point.
And don't underestimate the power of simply changing your phone's language settings to English.
Oh, yeah.
It's a small change that can make a big difference.
Those little things can really add up.
They can.
But what about actually speaking English?
Right.
That's where I really struggle.
I know a lot of people feel that way.
I get so nervous. Any tips for overcoming that fear?
Speaking practice is crucial.
Yeah.
And I know it can be intimidating, but remember, the more you speak, the more you activate Broca's area, that speech production center we talked about earlier.
Right.
Like building muscle memory for your tongue.
So the key is to just push through the discomfort and practice as much as possible.
Exactly. Find language exchange partners, join English-speaking groups, or even practice talking to yourself in the mirror.
Okay.
The more you speak, the more fluent and confident you'll become.
I like the idea of, what was it called? Multisensory learning, I think.
Yeah, multisensory learner.
The pasted text article also suggests that
Good one.
it's about engaging multiple senses, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, to make learning more effective.
It's a powerful approach.
But how do we actually do that with English? Like, what does that look like in practice?
It's about creating a richer learning experience. For instance, imagine watching a movie with English subtitles,
Okay.
listening to its soundtrack,
Right.
and then writing a review or acting out a scene.
Ah, I get it.
That would be a great example of multisensory learning. This approach not only makes learning more engaging, but it also helps your brain form stronger connections and retain information better.
So it's about going beyond just reading textbooks and worksheets.
Yeah.
And really immersing ourselves in the language through different mediums.
Exactly.
I like that approach. What about learning vocabulary? Any tips for making those new words stick?
One suggestion that I find particularly helpful is to learn new words in context.
Context.
Instead of just memorizing isolated words from a list,
Okay.
try learning phrases and sentences that you might actually use in real-life conversations.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like learning a new word while watching a cooking show.
Right.
You're more likely to remember it because you associate it with the context of cooking.
Exactly. It's about making those connections in your brain and weaving new words into the fabric of your experiences.
I'm getting hungry now.
I know, right?
All of these strategies, they're giving me a whole new perspective on learning English.
Yeah.
It's not just about memorizing rules and vocabulary. It's about understanding how my brain works
Uh-huh.
and using that knowledge to my advantage.
Precisely. And that's what makes language learning so fascinating. It's a journey of self-discovery, cognitive growth, and endless possibilities.
Well said. I'm excited to keep exploring.
So we've talked about how learning English actually changes the physical structure of our brains
Yeah.
and some of the ways that we can tap into that, use that to our advantage.
Yeah.
But as with anything, there are always myths and misconceptions floating around.
Ooh, I love a good myth-busting session.
All right, let's do it.
What are some of the common misconceptions about learning English that we should address?
One that often discourages adults from even starting is this idea that they simply can't learn languages as effectively as children.
Yeah,
It's a misconception that's been around forever,
it really has.
but the science tells a different story.
Yeah, I've definitely encountered that belief.
Yeah.
People seem to think that after a certain age, our brains just lose their plasticity for language learning. Makes you feel like you've missed the boat.
Right, but what's interesting is that while children may have a more intuitive grasp of language in those early years,
Okay.
adults bring other advantages to the table.
Like what?
We're better at understanding complex grammar rules,
Oh.
recognizing patterns, applying our knowledge in different contexts.
So it's like we're less intuitive,
Right.
but we have more experience to draw on.
Exactly, yeah. It's like we have a more strategic and analytical approach.
So it's not that our adult brains are worse at language learning, they just learn differently. Instead of soaking it up like a sponge, we're using our analytical skills to piece it together.
Exactly. And this ties into another myth, the idea that you need like some special talent for languages to learn English.
Right, right.
The pasted text article, it makes it clear that it's not about innate ability, it's about consistent effort,
Okay.
using effective strategies,
Uh-huh.
and having the right mindset.
I love that. It makes language learning feel more accessible, like it's a skill that anyone can develop with the
Yeah.
right approach and dedication.
Right, we all have the capacity to learn languages.
Yeah.
It's about finding what methods work best for us as individuals and sticking with them.
Okay, those are two pretty big myths debunked.
Yeah.
Any others we should tackle?
One more that often pops up is this belief that you absolutely have to live in an English-speaking country to become fluent.
Oh, that's a common one.
Yeah.
It can make people feel like learning English is impossible if they can't just pack up and move abroad,
Right.
which for a lot of people just isn't realistic.
It's not. It's not. While immersion can certainly accelerate the process, it's not the only path to fluency.
Okay.
In today's world, we have so many resources available online
True.
through technology that can create those immersive experiences right in our own homes.
It's true. I mean, we're having this conversation about language learning right now.
Right.
And I'm willing to bet most of our listeners aren't in an English-speaking country at this very moment.
Exactly. We have online courses, language exchange apps, virtual tutors, a wealth of authentic English content like movies, music, books at our fingertips.
Right, right.
It's about being resourceful
Uh-huh.
and proactive in creating those immersive experiences.
So living abroad can be a great booster,
Yeah.
but it's not the only way.
Right.
You can find those immersive experiences wherever you are with a little effort.
Precisely. Now, shifting gears a bit, the British School in Barcelona blog made a really interesting point about how learning a new language, particularly English, might actually slow down the aging process of the brain.
Hold on. Are you serious? Learning English could actually help me stay sharp as I get older? That sounds almost too good to be true.
I know, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Tell me more about the science behind that. How does that actually work?
Well, it's not magic, but the research is pretty compelling.
Yeah.
Studies have shown that bilingual individuals, especially those who learned a second language later in life, they tend to have a delayed onset of age-related cognitive decline,
Wow.
including conditions like Alzheimer's and dementia.
That's incredible. So learning English isn't just about expanding our communication skills.
Right.
It's about taking care of our brains for the long term.
Exactly. It's like giving your brain a constant workout,
Yeah.
challenging it to adapt and learn new things, which in turn helps build that cognitive reserve and resilience against age-related decline.
So it's like an investment in my future brain health.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I'm definitely feeling even more motivated to keep learning now.
That's great to hear. And it's not just about preventing decline.
Right.
It's about enhancing our cognitive abilities in the present.
The British School of Barcelona blog, they also discuss how learning English can improve our multitasking skills.
Multitasking, how does that work?
Yeah.
It seems like learning a new language would require enough brain power on its own.
Think about it this way. When you're fluent in more than one language, your brain is constantly switching between different sets of rules, vocabulary, grammatical structures.
Right.
This constant mental juggling, it actually strengthens your brain's ability to handle multiple tasks and switch between them smoothly.
So our brains become mental acrobats, effortlessly flipping between different languages and tasks.
Exactly. And this improved multitasking ability can be a real asset in other areas of our lives, whether it's at work, in our personal lives, even just managing our daily to-do lists.
I can definitely see that. I've noticed that since I've been learning English more seriously, I feel like I can juggle more things at once without getting as overwhelmed.
Yeah.
It's like my brain has become more flexible and adaptable.
That's a great observation, and it highlights how the benefits of language learning extend far beyond communication. It's about cognitive flexibility, adaptability, and mental resilience,
Right.
which are incredibly valuable in today's fast-paced world.
It's like learning English gives you a mental edge in all areas of life.
It really does. And there's even more to explore. The British School of Barcelona blog also mentioned how learning English can enhance our decision-making abilities.
Decision-making. How does speaking English make us better decision makers?
It has to do with the way different languages can actually shape our thinking.
Okay.
The blog explained that when we learn a new language, we're not just learning new words and grammar.
Right.
We're also absorbing new ways of thinking about and perceiving the world. This exposure to different perspectives can make us more objective and analytical in our decision-making processes.
So it's like we're expanding our mental toolkit for making decisions. We're not just limited to our native language's way of looking at things. We have these alternative perspectives that can help us make more informed choices.
Exactly. And this can be particularly helpful in situations where emotions might be clouding our judgment.
Right.
By tapping into a more objective perspective offered by another language, we can make more rational and less impulsive choices.
That's incredibly valuable. It's like having an inner translator who helps us navigate complex situations with greater clarity and objectivity.
Precisely. And it's yet another example of how language learning goes beyond communication. It influences our thoughts, our perceptions, and ultimately our actions.
Wow.
Speaking of shaping our thinking, both of our sources emphasize how learning English can actually boost our creativity.
I love that. Creativity is such an important skill no matter what you do in life.
It is. It is.
But how does learning English specifically foster creativity?
The British School of Barcelona blog explains that by exposing ourselves to new ways of thinking and expressing ourselves, our brains become more flexible and open to new ideas. English, with its vast vocabulary, diverse literary traditions, and global reach, it provides a huge playground for exploring different perspectives and pushing the boundaries of our own creativity.
So it's like opening a door to a whole new world of creative possibilities.
Exactly.
We're not just limited to the tools and expressions of our native language.
Right.
We have access to this wider range of colors, textures, sounds with which to paint our creative visions.
Exactly. And by engaging with English literature, art, music, culture, we're constantly being inspired by new ideas, perspectives, ways of expressing ourselves.
It's like cross-pollinating our minds with the creativity of the world.
That's a great way to put it.
This is so inspiring. It makes me want to dive even deeper into the creative world of English.
Yeah.
Any tips for tapping into that creative potential?
One suggestion that stood out to me in the pasted text article is to engage with English content that you find personally meaningful and emotionally resonant. Whether it's a favorite book, a song that moves you, a movie that sparks your imagination, connecting with English on an emotional level can really unleash your creative juices.
That makes sense.
It's like when we're emotionally invested in something, we're more likely to be engaged and inspired by it.
Right.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to experiment with different creative outlets.
Like what?
Try writing short stories or poems in English, composing songs, creating artwork, even just journaling your thoughts and feelings. The key is to find what feels authentic to you and just let your creativity flow freely.
It's about finding joy in the process and using English as a tool for self-expression.
Precisely. And remember, there's no right or wrong way to be creative. It's about finding what resonates with you and allowing yourself to explore and experiment without judgment.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. We've gone way beyond the surface level of learning English and explored how it can enhance our cognitive abilities, boost creativity, and even shape the way we make decisions.
It's really powerful stuff.
It's mind-blowing.
It is.
We've covered so much ground today, but there's still one crucial aspect of language learning we haven't touched on yet: motivation.
Right.
How do we find that drive to keep going, especially when it gets tough?
You're absolutely right. Motivation is the fuel that keeps us going on this language learning journey.
Yeah.
And both sources we've looked at today, they highlight its importance.
So we've uncovered all these amazing benefits of learning English.
Yep.
But let's be honest, it's not always a walk in the park, right?
Right.
There are days when motivation can be hard to come by.
Absolutely. Motivation is the engine that drives us on this language learning journey.
It is.
And it's something that both the British School of Barcelona blog and the pasted text article, they really emphasize.
They do. But what does it actually mean to be motivated to learn a language?
Right.
Is it just about forcing yourself to study even when you don't feel like it?
It's actually much deeper than that.
Okay.
It's about finding that intrinsic motivation.
Intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, that inner spark that makes you want to learn,
Okay.
regardless of external pressures.
So it's not just about needing English for a job or a test.
Right.
It's about having A personal connection to the language and a genuine desire to learn it.
Exactly. Think about why you want to learn English. Is it to connect with people from other cultures, to travel the world with confidence, to explore new ideas and perspectives?
Yeah, I've noticed that when I have like a clear reason for learning,
Right?
like wanting to, I don't know, read a particular book in English or to have a conversation with someone from another country,
Uh-huh.
I'm much more motivated to study.
That's a perfect example of intrinsic motivation in action.
It is.
Yeah, it's about finding that personal connection that fuels your efforts and makes the process more enjoyable.
So it's not just about willpower.
Right.
It's about tapping into our passions and interests to fuel our language learning.
Precisely. And
Yeah.
the pasted text article had some great advice on how to cultivate that intrinsic motivation.
Okay, what did they say?
One suggestion was to set realistic and achievable goals.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed if you're just focused on the end goal of fluency.
Right, it's a long journey.
It is. Breaking it down into smaller steps, that feels much more manageable.
Exactly. Instead of aiming for fluency overnight,
Right.
focus on smaller milestones that you can celebrate along the way.
Okay.
Maybe it's learning 5 new words every day, watching an English movie without subtitles, or having a short conversation with a language exchange partner.
It's about focusing on progress, not perfection,
Yes,
and celebrating those small wins that can really keep you going.
absolutely. Another powerful strategy is to make learning English a part of your daily life,
Okay.
not just something you do in a classroom or with a textbook.
How can we do that in a practical way?
Think about your hobbies and interests.
Okay.
Do you love music? Immerse yourself in English songs. Are you a bookworm? Explore English literature. Are you a movie buff? Watch your favorite films in English.
I love that. It's about integrating English into the things we already enjoy doing.
Exactly. When you connect with the language on a personal level,
Yeah.
it becomes less of a chore and more of a natural part of your life.
I think that's a really powerful message.
Yeah.
It's not about forcing ourselves to learn English.
Right.
It's about finding ways to make it enjoyable and meaningful.
Precisely. And when we approach language learning with that mindset, the motivation follows naturally.
It does. It does. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
We've explored how learning English impacts our brains, the incredible benefits it brings, some practical strategies to boost our learning,
Yeah.
and the importance of finding that inner spark of motivation.
That intrinsic motivation.
Yes, it's been a fascinating exploration.
It has.
I hope our listeners are feeling as inspired as I am.
I hope so too.
I know I'm feeling incredibly motivated to continue my own English learning journey, armed with all this newfound knowledge.
That's fantastic. Remember, learning a new language is a gift you give yourself.
It is.
Embrace the challenges, celebrate the small wins, and never stop exploring the endless possibilities that come with mastering this global language.
And for anyone listening who might be on the fence about learning English,
Yeah,
we encourage you to take the leap. It's an adventure worth embarking on.
absolutely. Your brain, your life, and the world will be richer for it.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought to ponder.
Okay.
If learning a new language can have such a profound impact on our brains and our lives, what other seemingly simple activities might hold hidden cognitive benefits just waiting to be unlocked?
That's a great question. We encourage you to keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those brains buzzing.
Until next time, happy language learning.